If you use the internet today, there's a good chance that Google quietly decided what you saw, which links you trusted, and which answers felt relevant enough to believe, not because it told you what to think, but because for more than 2 decades, it has positioned itself as the invisible layer between questions and answers, shaping the flow of information so subtly that most people stopped noticing it was there at all. For years, Google wasn't just another technology company competing for attention. It became the default gateway to the internet itself, the system businesses depended on to survive, the platform advertisers relied on to reach customers, and the quiet authority that helped decide which ideas spread and which disappeared into obscurity. But right now, that position is under more pressure than at any point in Google's history. Not because people have stopped using search, and not because a single competitor suddenly caught up, but because the very forces that once made Google unstoppable are beginning to work against it, slowly and almost invisibly. Governments are no longer willing to accept one company controlling access to information without oversight. Artificial intelligence is changing how people search by delivering answers without links, and the business model that has funded much of the modern internet is starting to show cracks that can't be ignored. So the question is no longer whether Google will have to change, because that much is already happening, but whether the company can survive a future in which it no longer controls search in the way it once did, and what that loss of control would mean not just for Google itself, but for the internet as we've known it for the past 20 years. When Google was founded in the late 1990s, it didn't win because it was louder, flashier, or more aggressive than its competitors, but because it felt fundamentally different from everything else on the internet at the time. While other search engines were cluttered with banners, pop-ups, and paid placements, Google was clean, fast, and almost suspiciously empty, presenting itself not as a business trying to sell something, but as a neutral tool designed to help users find the best possible answer. That simplicity created trust, and that trust turned into habit, until searching the internet and Googling something became the same action in people's minds. Over time, Google stopped being a destination and became infrastructure, embedded so deeply into daily life that most users stopped thinking about it altogether. As Google's search engine improved, so did its understanding of human intent, learning not just what people typed, but what they actually meant, and quietly building one of the most powerful data systems ever created, capable of predicting needs before users were fully aware of them themselves. This dominance didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen by accident. It happened because Google positioned itself at the exact point where curiosity meets information, and once it controlled that intersection, everything else followed naturally. Behind Google's clean interface sits one of the most profitable business models in history, built on a deceptively simple idea. If you understand what people are searching for, you understand what they want. And if you understand what they want, you can sell that intent to advertisers at an almost unlimited scale. Search advertising didn't feel like advertising because it appeared at the exact moment of intent, blending into the experience so seamlessly that users rarely questioned it. Over time, this turned Google into something closer to a toll booth on the internet, collecting a small fee every time attention turned into action. Entire industries became dependent on this system, from small local businesses to global corporations, all competing for visibility in a space controlled by algorithms few fully understood and almost no one could challenge. As long as people clicked links, Google's power remained unquestioned because clicks meant traffic, traffic meant ads, and ads meant money. The system was self-reinforcing, efficient, and incredibly difficult to disrupt, until that behavior started to change. What made Google's advertising system so powerful wasn't just scale, but dependence. Over time, entire ecosystems quietly reorganized themselves around Google's rules, often without fully realizing how deep that dependence had become. Businesses stopped thinking in terms of customers and began thinking in terms of keywords, rankings, and algorithm updates, adjusting their products, pricing, and even messaging to fit what Google's systems rewarded. This dependency created an invisible hierarchy of winners and losers, where visibility often mattered more than quality, and where a single change in ranking logic could reshape entire markets overnight. For many companies, Google wasn't just a source of traffic. It was the difference between survival and irrelevance. What made this arrangement particularly fragile was how little control participants actually had. Google's systems were opaque by design, constantly evolving, and largely immune to external accountability. That opacity wasn't malicious, it was functional. It allowed Google to optimize continuously without interference. But it also meant that when things began to shift, few understood why. As mobile usage exploded, Google adapted seamlessly, embedding itself deeper into operating systems, browsers, and default behaviors. Search followed users everywhere, becoming less of an action and more of a reflex. The easier it became, the more indispensable it felt. This level of integration created a paradox. Google became so essential that questioning its role felt almost unthinkable. Regulators hesitated. Competitors struggled. Users rarely noticed. Power, when exercised quietly, is often the most stable form of power, until it isn't. The first cracks didn't appear as dramatic failures or sudden drops in usage, but as subtle shifts in how people interacted with information. Questions that once required multiple searches and comparisons were increasingly answered in a single interaction, often without leaving the platform at all. Artificial intelligence accelerated this shift, not by replacing search entirely, but by compressing it, turning exploration into direct answers and reducing the need to click through to external websites. This created a quiet but dangerous problem for Google, because fewer clicks mean fewer ads, and fewer ads mean the core engine that funds the company begins to slow down. For the first time, Google faced a future where delivering better answers might actually undermine its own business model, forcing the company to choose between user experience and long-term profitability. What makes this moment especially dangerous for Google is that the shift in search behavior didn't come with a clear breaking point. There was no sudden collapse, no dramatic drop that forced an immediate reaction. Instead, it arrived quietly, almost politely, embedded in small changes that were easy to ignore at first. People didn't stop searching, they stopped exploring. Where search once encouraged comparison, curiosity, and movement across the web, it increasingly pushed toward resolution, toward single answers that felt complete enough to accept without question. The journey mattered less. The destination became everything. For users, this felt efficient. For Google, it was existential, because the value of search was never just the answer itself, but the ecosystem built around the path to that answer. The websites visited, the ads displayed, the choices made along the way. When that path shortens, the entire system begins to lose depth. This change also altered how creators, publishers, and businesses experienced the internet. Content that once thrived on discovery struggled to survive in a world where answers appeared instantly, summarized, and detached from their original sources. Visibility became harder to earn, and loyalty became harder to build. And this is where Google's dilemma sharpens. To remain useful, it must embrace faster, more direct answers. To remain profitable, it needs users to move, click, and engage. Those two goals no longer align as neatly as they once did. For the first time, Google is forced to optimize against itself, balancing short-term user satisfaction against long-term structural stability, knowing that every improvement in convenience carries a hidden cost. And while this tension grows inside the product, pressure from the outside continues to build. As these internal pressures mounted, external scrutiny intensified. Governments that had once viewed Google as a neutral tool began to see it as a concentration of power too large to ignore. capable of shaping public discourse, influencing markets, and quietly setting the rules of visibility for the entire digital economy. Antitrust cases that once seemed symbolic became serious, with regulators openly discussing structural changes, forced separations, and limits on how much control one company should have over information flows. What makes this moment different from past challenges is that Google can no longer rely solely on technical superiority to defend itself. The threat is no longer just competition, but legitimacy. What truly unsettles regulators about Google isn't just market dominance, but narrative dominance. The ability to quietly frame reality by controlling which sources rise to the top and which disappear into the background. Even without intent, this kind of influence reshapes public understanding over time, subtly reinforcing certain perspectives while marginalizing others. Historically, societies have tolerated monopolies in infrastructure until the cost of that tolerance became visible. Railroads, oil, telecommunications, each followed a similar pattern. At first, efficiency justified concentration. Later, concentration justified intervention. Google now sits at that same historical inflection point. What complicates Google's case is that information itself is the commodity. Unlike oil or steel, information shapes behavior, belief, and collective memory. When access to information is filtered through a single dominant system, even unintentionally, the consequences extend far beyond economics. This is why the debate around Google feels different from previous tech controversies. It isn't just about competition or pricing. It's about trust, about who decides what is seen, about whether neutrality is even possible at scale. As artificial intelligence accelerates this tension by compressing complex topics into simplified answers, the stakes rise further. If search becomes interpretation rather than navigation, the question of control becomes unavoidable. Google finds itself in a position no company can comfortably occupy, powerful enough to be essential, but influential enough to be feared. Today, Google is still massive, still profitable, and still deeply embedded in daily life, but it operates in an environment that no longer assumes its dominance is permanent. Search is changing, advertising is under pressure, and regulators are watching more closely than ever before. Google isn't collapsing, but it is being forced to adapt in ways that could fundamentally reshape what the company looks like in the years ahead. Google didn't lose power because it failed to innovate. It lost certainty because the world around it changed. Control over information, once invisible, is now openly questioned, and the systems that define the internet for decades are being rewritten in real time. The future of Google won't be decided by a single lawsuit or a single technology, but by whether it can remain trusted in a world that no longer believes any platform should be untouchable. So the real question isn't whether Google will survive, but whether the internet itself is ready for a future where no single company decides how knowledge is found. If you had to choose, would you trust an algorithm to answer your questions or a company that built its empire on controlling the search for truth? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want more deep stories about power, money, and the systems shaping our world, subscribe to Wealth Untold. And whatever comes next, one thing is already clear. The era in which a single company could quietly control how the world searches for truth is coming to an end. What replaces it won't just shape Google's future, it will shape how all of us understand the internet itself.